I started the show last night by observing what I think is a somewhat remarkable development, which is that there was a major assassination attempt that took place on the former President of the United States, who is also the current frontrunner by all polls for regaining the presidency this year in the 2024 election. And it wasn't just an assassination attempt, it was one that came extremely close to succeeding. And it involved the firing of multiple bullets, one of which actually hit the ear of the person the Secret Service was duty-bound to protect. And it all happened under extremely bizarre circumstances in terms of how it is possible that the Secret Service could possibly have allowed to happen a security failure of that magnitude. And obviously there's a lot of other questions and doubts about what exactly happened here, in part because of how extraordinary it is to even believe the level of incompetence that could have pervaded the Secret Service to this extent, but also the very slow and begrudging transparency that the Secret Service is providing and the vague and shifting explanations that the director of the Secret Service is providing have only intensified those doubts and questions even more. Not resolving any of those questions and doubts, but actually creating all new ones. Here from CNN today, you see the headline, Rally Security Failure Has Secret Service at Odds with Its Local Law Enforcement Allies. Quote, in an interview with ABC News on Monday, Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheetle said it was local police who were inside the building at the time of the shooting and that it was their role to secure the building, roughly 120 to 150 meters away, yet outside the hard perimeter and with a line of sight to the rally stage. Now, we showed you this last night, that what they're essentially saying the Secret Service is that even though that building from which the shooter fired was in extremely close proximity to the stage where President Trump was to speak, and that even though it had a direct line of fire to that stage, that apparently the Secret Service just arbitrarily draws an extremely tight and small circle around where their protectee will be speaking, and they just say anything outside of this line is not our responsibility, it's the responsibility of the local police. Why would the Secret Service simply not, there you see the screen, we showed you this last night. You can see there the location of the shooter on that sloped roof, which becomes important. And just look at how close that is to the stage where President Trump was speaking. It's right there. It's unimpeded. But apparently the Secret Service, according to them at least, took this little tiny circle and superimposed it on this map. And that building was outside of their circle. And so they said, that's not for us. The whole point of the Secret Service is to do everything possible to eliminate obvious threats to the person that they're duty-bound to protect. So it's an attempt to blame the local police of Butler, Pennsylvania, for the fact that Donald Trump was almost assassinated, even though obviously the local police is not trained for that kind of work. That's what the Secret Service is for. Quote, one former Secret Service agent took issue with Cheetle placing so much blame on local law enforcement, telling CNN, quote, the Secret Service is responsible for everything, not just the inner perimeter. They should make sure all of this is covered. Quote, officers inside a building, that's not mitigating a high ground vulnerability, the former agent said. Attendees in the crowd noticed the gunman on the roof nearly 2 minutes before the shots were fired. A CNN analysis of witness video and the official video feed of Trump's speech shows. So far, pretty much one of the only explanations that we've gotten is the classic Washington response, the sort of bureaucratic response, that's not my job. It's not my job to secure that building right next to the stage. Even though we're the Secret Service, that's the job of the local police or whoever, and if they didn't do it, that's their fault. Don't look to us. I mean, that's mind-boggling that would be their explanation. Here's more of that from the Washington Post today. Police snipers were inside the building as the Trump rally shooter fired from the roof. Quote, the revelation adds to a growing list of questions about the security arrangements outside the Pennsylvania rally's perimeter. Quote, the Beaver County District Attorney's Office confirmed that a SWAT team from the county was at Saturday's rally, but declined to release additional information, pointing to ongoing investigations by state and federal authorities. In a written statement Tuesday, the county district attorney's office said, quote, we are proud of the heroic actions taken by our officers. Richard Goldinger, the Butler County district attorney, said in an interview that the SWAT teams from his jurisdiction were all inside the security perimeter. Quote, Secret Service was in charge. And so it was their responsibility to make sure that the venue and the surrounding area was secured, he told the Post. That's common sense, I think. That's their job. Yeah, that seems common sense to me as well. He then added, quote, for them to blame local law enforcement is them passing the blame when they hold the blame, in my opinion. Again, imagine that. The whole reason the Secret Service exists is to protect presidents, former presidents, leading presidential candidates. And again, as we talked about last night, this was not some exotic and unpredictable attack. It was the most obvious and primitive thing you could do, which is if you want to kill somebody, you find a nearby location where you can hide and gives you a direct line of sight to the stage so that you can shoot them in an unimpeded way. And I mean, it doesn't even take a trained law enforcement professional to look at that map and immediately identify that roof as being an obvious source of danger. The Secret Service Director, Kimberly Cheetle, was essentially required to start doing media interviews because obviously people have a lot of questions. Now, I was saying before that what amazes me is that I don't think this is getting nearly the attention that it deserves. And I understand there's a lot of other things going on. President Trump just selected his vice presidential running mate. The RNC is going on. There's major court rulings, such as the one we referenced last night of the court in Florida dismissing the entire criminal prosecution brought against Trump. I understand there are other major news events, but this is an assassination attempt on a former president and a leading presidential candidate of the kind we haven't seen in decades. And again, it wasn't some devilish and sinister and complex mastermind who devised a way that no one could have anticipated. This is something the Secret Service should have seen and didn't. So here is the Secret Service Director, Kimberly Cheetle, answering what I think are the most basic questions, but her answers, I think, are extremely strange, as is her whole posture. Let's watch this.
Director of the United States Secret Service, Kimberly Cheetle, speaks exclusively with ABC News, taking responsibility for that stunning breakdown in security.
This is an event that should have never happened.
Who is most responsible for this happening?
What I would say is that the Secret Service is responsible for the protection of the former president.
So the buck stops with you?
The buck stops with me. I am the director of the Secret Service. It was unacceptable, and it's something that shouldn't happen again.
Now, that's what she's saying. If any journalist asks the director of an agency, so the buck stops with you, of course they're forced to say yes. That's the famous Harry Truman quote, the buck stops with me. What's she going to say? No, it doesn't stop with me, it's someone else's. But what they're doing, although she's saying that, is running to media outlets and blaming the local law enforcement there for what happened, as though it's their responsibility to have protected Donald Trump. So she's saying this because she's forced to, and you can see she doesn't even want to. But her agency is out there not at all accepting responsibility, but instead blaming others for their own failures.
Minutes after Trump took the stage Saturday in front of thousands of people, gunman Thomas Matthew Crooks wounding the former president and 3 others before a Secret Service counter sniper took him out. I'm
being told that the shooter was actually identified as a potential person of suspicion. Units started responding to seek that individual out. Unfortunately, with the rapid succession of how things unfolded, by the time that individual was eventually located, they were on the rooftop and were able to fire off at the former president.
ABC News now learning that heavily armed local police were actually stationed inside the building. The gunman climbed, but they missed him. This video showing a bystander pointing towards the building as police look onto the roof. Butler town officials confirming that after they became aware of the threat, a local police officer climbed up to the roof and confronted Crooks, but did not succeed in stopping him.
What was your reaction when you saw?
So you see how much, beyond the obvious fact that that roof should have been secured, and having local police inside the building obviously doesn't protect against that, because the shooter just climbed up the building instead of entering through it. And why didn't they just have counter snipers on the roof? All of these questions she's really not answering at all. And she's actually admitting how much advance warning there was, that he was identified as a source of danger, but that they couldn't act in time. There were police officers who saw him and confronted him well before the shooting. There were people who are in the crowd, just ordinary people not trained in detecting dangers and threats, who were able to just look right up at the building and see that somebody was climbing up there and laying down with a rifle, an AR-15 as it turns out. And all these things, none of them provoked any intervention by the Secret Service. All the things that they're acknowledging they had notice of.
How the events unfold on Saturday?
Shock, and then concern, obviously, for the former president.
Investigators now trying to determine whether roof access had been properly locked down. The shooter climbing up seemingly unimpeded, about 400 feet from the stage, with a direct line of sight on the former president.
Should that roof have been secured?
I mean, that is, you can see it there as well. Here in the upper left-hand corner, you see the, sorry, that was a video, so I don't think I can just, yeah, I can't touch it, so I ruined it, so we're going to just get that back
Director
up
of
in
the
a second.
United States Secret on the former president.
All right, there, so let's stop it. Let's just stop it there. There you see the image. There's the, in the upper left-hand corner is the shooter on the roof. He's 400 feet away from President Trump, who's here in orange. And you can see that there's a direct line of fire. I mean, that building is right next to where the crowd and the stage are. How is it conceivable that the Secret Service didn't think to look there? Now, they go on to ask her about that, and here's what she tries to justify it with.
And so, you know, there's a safety factor that would be considered there, that we wouldn't want to put somebody up on a sloped roof. And so, you know, the decision was made to secure the building from inside.
All right, now, this is what I mean by not only unbelievable explanations, but also contradictory ones. The first explanation that the Secret Service gave for why they didn't secure that building was because it was outside of their arbitrary and very tiny, apparently, perimeter, where they just say, we're going to just take care of threats here, but threats outside, that's not our concern, even though we're the Secret Service. And so the Secret Service said from the start, that building was not our responsibility because it was outside the perimeter. But here she's saying, oh no, we were aware of that roof. We even thought about putting somebody on there, but we decided not to for safety reasons because the roof was sloped. The shooter had no problem at all climbing up there and being extremely comfortable on this dangerously sloped roof. A roof too sloped to allow a Secret Service agent to be on the roof safely because he might fall off a two-story building with that slope. The shooter was able to not only get up there and walk over to where he wanted to be and then lie down and position himself with perfect balance to aim right at Donald Trump's head and get off 5 or 6 shots. But even once he was killed and he no longer had control of his body, his corpse did not fall off the roof. And the explanation for why there was no Secret Service there was because it was too dangerous to put a Secret Service agent on a 2-story roof right next to where President Trump was speaking, even though this 20-year-old kid with no training climbed right up there, was completely comfortable on there, never fell off at all, and not even once he was dead did his corpse fall off. It's a sloped roof, and that's too dangerous for the Secret Service?
Says the Secret Service was responsible for the inner perimeter of the rally where Trump was, but local police were responsible for the outer perimeter where the gunman was located. In Washington, lawmakers demanding answers, calling on the Secret Service director to appear before Congress.
We will be transparent both internally with my own folks and externally with members of Congress and with the American public. That's what the public deserves.
The President and Homeland Security Secretary said today they had 100% confidence in you, but there are some members of Congress calling on you to resign.
I appreciate the Secretary's comments, and we're going to continue to be transparent and communicate with people.
Do you plan to stay on? Absolutely.
I do plan to stay on.
She has no intention of resigning. Now, let me ask you this question. I mean, it used to be the case that people in public life had a sense of shame. People would resign all the time if they were responsible for things but failed to fulfill that responsibility. In certain cultures, people kill themselves in order to expel that shame from their family. I'm not suggesting anyone do that. I'm just saying that there are cultures for accountability far greater than the one in which we live, even when it works. But there's no accountability anymore. You look at the corporate media, as I said, Jeffrey Goldberg was more responsible than any other single journalist for selling the lie, the crucial lie, that Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda were in a secret alliance with Saddam Hussein. Something that was obviously crucial to get the public to believe, because that was the only way the public would support an invasion of Iraq, is if they believed Iraq had a connection to the 9/11 attack. And 70% of Americans actually did believe that, even 6 months after the invasion took place. A lie of that magnitude would be instantly career-ending for a journalist in any sort of minimally accountable society. And yet, not only did Jeffrey Goldberg not suffer any career repercussions, as we've recounted many times, he continued to thrive even more than before that happened. He was at the New Yorker and he was enticed to go to the Atlantic, where the then editor David Bradley sent ponies to his house, exotic ponies for his kids to play with, in an attempt to lure him to run the magazine. And he now runs that magazine for the large donor billionaire heiress Lorene Powell Jobs. So he continued to rise. Natasha Bertrand, after all of the CIA lies that she spread, including the idea that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, kept getting promoted throughout media. There is no accountability in corporate media. When's the last time you've ever heard any of them admit any real error? Notwithstanding how many times what they've said proved to be completely untrue, let alone resign for it. It's a completely accountability-free industry, and that's true of Washington as well. If you're the director of the Secret Service and one of the people under your custody that you're duty-bound to protect ends up an inch away from having his head blown off solely because, by mere coincidence, he happened to move his head at the very last second, if that doesn't cause the Secret Service director to resign, what could possibly cause her resignation? And I am certain there will be no demands, no pressure from the Biden administration for her to resign, because that's the kind of accountability that simply does not exist in our society. Here, The Hill also reports on this. Secret Service director says she will not resign after the Trump assassination. This is, I think, something that is not only disturbing in and of itself, this kind of lack of accountability, but I really do think that it raises serious questions about what actually happened here. As I said, I'm not in any way suggesting that there was anything sinister going on in terms of an intention to allow this to happen or to cause it to happen. But anyone who's looking into it would have to consider that. Remember, when the Warren Commission was convened to purportedly find out the truth about the assassination of JFK, one of the major suspicions was that the CIA was involved, which is why it was so bizarre that one of the leading members, in fact, the leading member of the commission, not the chairman, that was Earl Warren, which is why it's called the Warren Commission, but the person who was given a lot of the authority on the Warren Commission for how it conducted itself was the longtime director of the CIA, Alan Dulles. He was essentially investigating himself, but that was a concern. And that was something the Warren Commission was supposed to investigate. So the more the Secret Service gives these preposterous explanations about perimeters and blaming the local police and not wanting to put a Secret Service agent on that roof because it was dangerously sloped and could put the Secret Service is supposed to, a Secret Service agent is supposed to risk their lives to protect the person under their protection. And you saw how brave they are, how trained they are. They climbed onto that stage despite having no idea whether more bullets were coming, and they took their own bodies and used it to shield President Trump. They were ready to get shot in order to protect him. That's the job. So these people who are willing to put their lives on the line, who are expected to put their own bodies between a bullet and the person they're protecting, none of them could safely go on a sloped roof, despite how obvious of a danger point that was. And yet this 20-year-old just climbed up it, like what, he was Spider-Man or something? It was because it was an extremely easy building to ascend, and it was obviously not a very steep slope given the ease with which he managed to do all sorts of things on that roof without even getting close to falling off, including once he was dead. So the more explanations you have that make no sense, the more effort there is to shift blame, the more effort there is to obfuscate, of course the more doubts and skepticism there's going to be about whether we're being given the whole story. That's irrational. That's a rational thing to do. And I think all that's going to happen is these doubts and these questions and these beliefs that there's more to the story than what we're being told are going to continue to grow precisely because of the behavior of the director of the Secret Service and the Secret Service itself in obviously doing everything possible to protect themselves and doing almost nothing to ensure that the public is informed in any credible way that they actually have an understanding, that we actually have an understanding of what happened there. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.